else that might have been recorded?
I want to thank you. We're quite excited. We're having a string of Santa Clara University related topics, and it's kind of great to have people making a film about John Montgomery coming here today. So I want to warmly thank John and Veronica for coming here and presenting on John Montgomery. I think it's quite something to think about what early aviation was like and the kind of risks and dangers these people took to basically create an industry and a real improvement to life in America and life in the world. So I think it's good. I think you have a nice angle on this story, and so let's give a nice hand to John and Veronica.
All right, well, thank you so much for having us here. We ran into Noel at a talk a few weeks ago, and we kind of talked about not just this project, but kind of the educational outreach opportunities, and realized we really had a lot in common, our goals, and it's so much fun, it's so much important, you know, to inspire the youth to, I mean, this is stuff that you can do with your hand, and it's not a video game. You got to kind of, you know, get a sense of a little bit of technology and craftsmanship and how the real world works around you. And wow, this is fun. You know, what a wonderful thing to kind of turn kids onto. And that's something that we hope will kind of kick off the back of the truck, you know, as this Montgomery movie project is going by. So, you know, thank you guys and Kyle for inviting us here. So, my partner here, Veronica Craven, is head of Craven Entertainment. She's a local independent film producer, and she really made this happen. This was an idea that I had, and I'm a Silicon Valley startup angel investor kind of guy, and I have this disease where I never say no to any project that comes around. That doesn't mean I know how to do it. Often enough, I'm lucky enough to find someone like Veronica, you know, can actually put wings on my project, you know, and get us going. So I've really enjoyed her. But if you've ever seen any Comcast sports, she was probably involved with the production of that. And if you've seen a couple of really crazy, silly horror kinds of movies, she may have been involved with that, but she's just been fantastic as a researcher on this, found out stuff that I didn't know, and that's really been a great addition to the project, and we're getting this thing off the ground. Introduce myself. So my name is John Giddings. As I said, I live in Los Gatos. I'm a commercial multi-engine private pilot. I've always enjoyed airplanes. I've built the very first airplane I built was a glider, kind of a 1 meter thing like that, and with all the spars, you know, and I got to cut everything and all the doping and everything. And I remember I was in high school and I named it. I was really bold and brash, and I named it Icarus, and it was well named. I went out, my dad and I, all summer, right, we built that thing. Let's just get the surgical tubing. That thing just went right up and just hammered over. Ooh. And we just went over and quietly picked all the stuff up and went home, and that was it. And I built another airplane with my wife that I had a pretty good flight with, and then it came down to the ground intact, and then we built it together. So I went first, but then I let her fly it, and she was doing better than me at first, and then it hammered over, and that got destroyed. And then I told you about with my daughters. But I think the fourth is the charm. So I have another airplane in my future here soon. I'm an adjunct professor at Santa Clara University in the Graduate School of Engineering. I know Godfrey Mongol real well. In fact, he's one of our big personal sponsors of this movie project. And he's been fantastic making resources of the university available to us. We visited the Santa Clara University archives to get some of the historical, the first-hand, actual documents. And Santa Clara University Archives is interesting because it's the Santa Clara Mission Archive. So and the Santa Clara Mission is the only surviving of the California missions all up and down the coast. So all of those records are consolidated there. So it's like all this stuff in Latin, you know, from 1720, and baptism. It's kind of a Da Vinci Code experience. We go in there to get into the secret room with, no pencils, no pens, and gloves, and we get to see these actual Montgomery artifacts. It's really inspiring. So Godfrey's been wonderful. I run an angel investor group called the Tech Angel Group. My background is kind of semiconductor physics and solar and LEDs, things like that. If anybody knows anybody that's looking to start a company, my angel group loves talking to guys like that, so happy to talk to you about that after the show. I think that's about it for me. So, well, what we're going to talk about in this talk, well, we can kind of be flexible with our time. I want to talk about the context of where John Montgomery did his innovations. This Victorian era was this really interesting period of an explosion of new technology, and a lot of interesting things were going on. We have this conception, if you go to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, you kind of think that the Wright brothers airplane was just sort of born wholly formed, and that not a lot else went on before that. There's some fascinating things that were going on at the same time, and not all of it was brilliant, but it was kind of almost brilliant, and we want to talk about those things. And we'll say a little bit about John Montgomery. And Gary Fogel is coming next time. So he's a co-author of a book about John Montgomery, and we're working with him. He's a creative consultant for the film. And you'll get a real deep dive on everything about Montgomery with him. We'll say a little bit about the movie, and then talk about these educational opportunities that we'd like to spin off from the movie. And collaborating with you guys, I think you guys probably have more experience with those kinds of projects than we do. So we want to kind of bring whatever we can, or we kind of, 1 + 1 = 3, and get more stuff going on with the kids. So what did the world look like in the Victorian era? This was, I think the best definition is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So everything prior to that, you have this world where 90% of the population lives and dies within 10 miles of where you're born. It's kind of a days, where you could go and back before the sun sets, and the bandits would be after you. And then after the Industrial Revolution, we have cars and airplanes and trains. So it's huge transformation. I think it's interesting to look at what the novelists of that time were talking about. So primarily, look at Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and what sort of books were plausible for the first time. So we have things like, Around the World in 80 Days, just sort of to explore that idea. What would it be like? You could actually go around the world, never mind 10 miles from your house by sunset, circumnavigate the globe and come back and have picked up a day. What a bizarre idea that was. And what about traveling around under the sea? What about going to the moon? And then H.G. Wells says, what about traveling forward in time? And well, what if other people came here from some other strange place? You can kind of see this creativity. People are really kicking down the doors and thinking about new things. And of course, all of this technology was supporting this at the same time. I had the Transcontinental Railroad cutting down from months. I mean, before the railroad, people came here from Kentucky, and everybody didn't get here alive, and it took a couple of months. And that would be the experience of John Montgomery's ancestors. Ocean liners, steamships crossing the oceans, transatlantic cables carrying information, telephone, radio. The largest telescope in the world was actually here on top of Mount Hamilton, the Lick Observatory. So this was not this, Santa Clara wasn't this kind of dusty saloon town with draw partner. I mean, this was a pretty sophisticated place. There was a lot of commerce going on. There were buildings going on, and the people here were sophisticated as well. Electric light was showing up, and of course, we got to talk about moving pictures of the Edward Muybridge experiments up at Stanford, and the beginnings of air travel. And with all of those things going on, when I go down that list, we always talk about, oh yeah, the internet, it's so amazing. Wow, we've got this phone, and I could look up stuff without having to go to the library. I look at that list and I think that's a bigger deal. The fact that you could cross the country, the fact that you could think, I could meet someone who's been to another country, someone who's been to India or Japan, and sit down in the same world with them, that's really a lot to wrestle with if you're growing up in that period of time. And of course, it'd be really inspiring. Now, air travel, so people started, experimenting with that, playing around, having some success. Something that really struck me as I was reading more and more about that is, to us, air travel, of course, is very common. It's not the slightest bit intimidating for us to try to do. But back then, stepping up into the air was like getting in a raft and pushing out into the Pacific Ocean and not knowing what was going to happen. And an example of this, the very first hot air balloon, the Montgolfier balloon, which was a little bit earlier than this period. But just an example of how intimidating flight was. There wasn't a person in that first balloon that went up. They put a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. And those were 3 different experiments going on. So they put the sheep up there because they thought, well, that's kind of like human physiology. Let's see if the sheep passes out. Let's see if the sheep goes crazy. And then let's put a duck up there because the ducks can seem to be able to fly, 1,000 feet high, so the duck should be okay. And then as a control, they put a rooster up there because that's a bird like the duck, but roosters don't fly. And you can kind of see in that thinking, they were really worried. I don't know what's going to go on. I mean, that's a lot of effort for an experiment. And I think back like the first Mercury flight, where they sent the monkeys up because they weren't sure, maybe your eyeballs would distort and you wouldn't be able to see anything. They just didn't know. So it was really a scary thing to get into a balloon and float away from the ground. Then when they got, so that was starting off with hot air. When they figured out with industrial processing how to make hydrogen, and by the way, the way you make hydrogen is you get 1,000 gallons of hot sulfuric acid and pour it over a ton of iron. Beautiful. What could go wrong? So now you fill up a balloon. A hot air balloon will cool off at least. I mean, after 100 years they realize that, hot air balloon. But a hydrogen balloon go up and stay up for a long, long time. So the experiments with hydrogen balloons were tethered. They were actually tied to the ground. So imagine this, kind of getting into a little boat. Say, well, I'll put a long rope. I mean, I'll go out to the ocean, but I don't want to get out of sight of shore. So the first experiments they were doing with hydrogen balloons were tethered, and it was about 20 years of that before somebody was finally, I guess, crazy enough or brave enough. And that was this fellow, Santos Dumont, in Brazil and France. And he designed this craft here with a little dirigible, which means you can steer it, and flew a circle around the Eiffel Tower in 1898. And that was sort of a demonstration. He was probably a macho guy. Ha ha, look what I did. I swam a long ways away from shore, when I came back. But incredibly intimidating. And then once people saw that was possible, some more people started to jump in. So Ferdinand Zeppelin built these larger commercial Zeppelins. This down here is a dirigible. This was actually flown in right here in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1868. It's called the Aviator. And it was built by a guy named Frederick Marriott. And this is Mark Twain. When Mark Twain was out here working, Frederick Marriott was a newspaper man, and Mark Twain was sort of see this guy working on this dirigible in the airplane, and Mark Twain was fascinated by the idea of building an something that could actually fly through the air. And years later, it was kind of the early 60s when Twain was out here. In 1868, when it flew, Mark Twain was editing a newspaper back in Connecticut, and he gets this little telegraph news wire, I guess, kind of thing they had. And it says, the Aviator has flown. And Mark Twain was exasperated. He goes, well, that's it? Tell us what's going on. And he wrote this very interesting open letter to the state of California in his newsletter. He said, California, send us news of your Aviator, because surely we were at the moment of learning how to navigate the airways, just the way our schooners have mastered the oceans and our locomotives have conquered the lands and tunnels, go through mountains. The next step is to figure out how to navigate the air. And our greatest fear is that the secret of doing this lies hidden in some nook of some unknown genius. And we're all worried that he may perish before he himself discovers what this secret might be, and then we will never go. So it turns out that at that first demonstration of the Aviator in 1869 was John Montgomery. So he was an 11-year-old boy standing there, and his father was buddies with Marriott. He saw this thing go up, and he goes, Papa, I want to fly. And he went home and built his own little model, a little bag, and filled it up with some hot air and made a little kind of a steam motor, and kids could do that. And that's a story I would love the kids kind of realize, with things lying around the house, you can actually do a lot of interesting stuff. So this is hot air. And there's kind of several paths that I'm exploring through. This one is just ornithopters. So this is building an aircraft just by trying to copy the motion of birds or fish. So birds flap their wings. So I'm going to build something that flaps its wings, and without any understanding of aerodynamics, let's see if it flies. And there was just this exhaustive creativity of people trying to do different ways. It's actually recorded. This fellow in 1858 was the first guy to flew a small model and estimated 40 feet. So I think 40 feet wouldn't get to the end of that table right there. And I think if I kind of tossed something underhand, so how much flying was even involved or something like that. Yet that was, the race has begun. And then Gustav got up to 70 meters, and he had wings that were flapping by gunpowder charges, exploding. So there's a lot of people who, they don't really have a sense of these things. And this, again, something that we took, for granted. Alphonse Pernod used rubber band power as a power source for his ornithopter. Then here, Victor Tatain, starting to get into a little bit more of understanding that things are more complicated, actually made wings that would twist. So people start looking closer at birds' wings and noticing there's something else going on. It's not just a rectangle like a Mickey Mouse wing. There's something going on there. But they really lacked the analytical skills to precisely understand what it was. They just kind of mimic it as best as they could. Lawrence Hargrave, this is interesting, a fellow down in Australia, completely alone. But he had all of these ideas, and he experimented with everything. We'll see him in a couple of these things. Rubber bands, springs, steam, compressed air. You can imagine how dangerous even just launching one of these things would have been. And then finally getting on later, a fellow, E.P. Frost, made a steam-powered ornithopter. It was large enough to fit a person in. That's this one right here. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen videos of kind of old-time airplanes and stuff like that. There typically would be a couple of ornithopters in there. And the scene, I can do my impersonation of every ornithopter thing. The guy walks up to it, hits and he backs away like that, and the thing starts going and disintegrates, and flies into a million pieces. So this was never flown with an actual man in it. But guys were going after him. I mean, there's bravery on the ground. These guys are excited, and they're risking their lives, and we inherit that legacy. I mean, that's kind of a reverent thing to realize. Every time these guys did an experiment, they were risking their necks. We get that, we get to stand on those shoulders. So the ornithopter, people eventually, this Italian fellow, Alfonso Borrelli, he finally sort of scientifically said, the ornithopter isn't going to work. Let's quit doing all these ornithopters. Despite the fact that birds were doing it all the time. I mean, there's something in there, but so let's not worry about it. But boy, it made a wonderful dream, pictures like this. So ornithopters didn't really go anywhere, but for one thing. In 1809, there was a newspaper article about this particular ornithopter design, and it described how the fellow was sort of bounding up, and he could sort of hop like 100 feet in the air, and then do these big, slow hops, and would land, and he could move his thing, and he'd hop, and he'd use his ornithopter like that. Really interesting article describing what this guy had done. What the newspaper article left out is that there was a balloon, basically kind of like doing wire work or zero gravity sort of a simulation. That was left out of the newspaper. But this fellow named George Cayley saw that article and, wow, people are really flying. I've got to do that too. I've got to catch up with what these other guys are doing. So I'm curious, some of these names I mentioned, how many of you have heard of George Cayley? A couple of guys, okay. All right, and then another branch of this is helicopters. So Da Vinci sort of, thinking about, interesting ideas. The Archimedes screw works in water. Maybe that could work in air. So that was something to start with. In 1842, W.H. Phillips said, well, let's get steam going up the center shaft and out the blades and try to drive that. So, you get steam power and all kinds of dangerous stuff. George Cayley, who was experimenting with a bunch of things, getting a little older there, he hit on the idea of counter-rotating props. So in this little carriage that he has right there, and you can see the Chinook helicopter definitely owes some heritage to that. Now you can see, those are just flat blades. So it doesn't completely have a grasp of the cambered prop, the cambered wing, although he did get that later on. You can see at this point, not quite. The term helicopter got coined in 1877, Emmanuel Giddings made this form of a helicopter. So these are, imagine a whole bunch of kind of spirals going up. So the idea was that is you would spin that, it would lift you up, and then if something went wrong, it inflated like an umbrella. It could make a parachute. So finally someone's sort of thinking, okay, what are you going to do once you get up? How are you going to wind up getting down? And Thomas Edison also experimented with helicopters using a gun cotton engine. His experiments were stopped eventually after repeated explosions in the laboratory. Even the guys that don't even get to fly, are risking their necks with this pushing the aviation frontier. Now, kites. I mean, again, something we completely take for granted is kites. We typically talk about the Chinese kind of originating the kites. I came across this myth that Maui actually flew the very first kite, and that's a prettier picture. Put that as something different. Now we come back to Lawrence Hargrave down in Australia, and he invented the box kite and got a little more precise with it. Now the interesting thing about the box kite is you realize that some of the first gliders were box kites. Just that exact airfoil. That's an octave Chinook. That's octave Chinook glider right there. So this box kite principle, and then of course the barn door type hexagonal kite. So William Eddy, you get some interesting characters in these early days because no one's an aerospace engineer, right? Someone's got a day job, and then they have this passion that they get together with other strange people in kind of quiet, remote places. Oh, back. So he was an accountant and a journalist, and he started playing with kites. He wound up making a little bit of a business taking up scientific instruments and cameras. So if a newspaper wanted a picture of the city after the fire or when the circus came to town or something like that, he could arrange this, one of his barn door kites. And other ideas, so you see these, they say, well, I want to lift more heavy stuff. They say, well, put more kites on there. And this is kind of an ancestor of multi-plane, triplane, quadplane. This is sort of the idea. They're experimenting with that, and I would have never recognized that before. Then this fellow, Samuel Cody. So this is not Wild Bill Cody, but he wasn't above exploiting that a lot of other people thought. So he actually had a little Wild West show, looked an awful lot like Wild Bill Cody, and he made a good living with that. But he was also really interested in flying. And he built on, so it turns out with the barn doors, if you want to really lift something heavy like a person, the barn door kites just won't quite do it. You need a box kite, you need a Hargrove type kite. But then if you'd like to steer that kite a little bit, you can see it starts to meld into a winged box kite. So there's kind of this missing link here. And that was Cody's. That was Samuel Cody's innovation. And he actually put people in his box kites, sold in the military, and had people 1,000 feet high in his big box kites. And now we get into gliders. So
Did they have active control while they were on this kite with wings? The attitude of the.
That's a really good question. I mean, it would have been. My impression is probably not. It's probably just a lean to the left, a little bit. I mean, there was some intention with those wings to do a little more than just hang in the air. They might have been trying to get more lift, but you have an opportunity for some control. But I don't think you would have been diving. You're tethered anyway, so you might just be thinking in terms of radius, not squirreling around. So glider guys, now I want to ask another question I should have asked at the beginning. How many of you have heard of John Montgomery before tonight? Oh, that's fantastic.
I went to Santa Clara, so I had to hear it.
There you go. Yes, by just breathing the air in Santa Clara, you hear about John Montgomery. But there were a lot of other guys. And this is another thing, you kind of mentioned before, with our telling the story, pointing out the things that John Montgomery did. before the Wright brothers, there were other guys, you know, kind of shoulder to shoulder with Montgomery. We don't hear those guys' story very much because you say Wright brothers and we're done. And I think the analogy, I mean, I think a lot of us grew up hearing that Columbus discovered America, right? And that's a nice, simple story, and I can kind of understand simplifying stuff to teach a first grader, but the truth is more complex and more interesting about all the other people that came here, and that Columbus actually never even made it to America, but you know, how did he wind up getting the credit that he did get? You don't have to take anything away from what Columbus did. I mean, he risked his neck and did something, you know, pretty bold and dangerous and raised a whole lot of money to do it, so, you know, we don't have to take him down, but there's just a lot more going on. So I mentioned George Cayley. So George Cayley in the 1840s in England really kicked the door open. He was kind of the first person to really do a scientific approach. And he did lots of experiments with his gliders. He tried as best he could to understand that the wing was curved. What kind of a curve, he didn't master. How much of a curve, you know, what does the curve actually do? But he made wings that were just sort of arbitrarily curved, and lo and behold, he got a little bit of lift out of it. This is his glider that he made. It was one successful, or very successful first flight. Flew about 600 feet off of a cliff. He didn't do it himself. He had his coachman get into the glider and pushed his coachman off the cliff. And the coachman, it is said, when he landed and was sort of somewhat safe, was so terrified from the experience that he ran off and was never heard from again. So you were asking about what kind of sense of control there was, you know, in these vehicles. But I think it's interesting to see this, you know, the idea that a boat, you know, I mean, I guess they knew what boats looked like, and this thing's sailing in the air, so I guess you ought to have a boat.
Soapbox Racer comes to mind.
Yeah, Soapbox Racer. So, you know, and I can think of ways that they could have reduced weight on that, you know, and sort of those wheels are probably a little more, you know, than he needs, but they were having some nice first steps. Then some other guys you don't hear about, John Neck. This is a Polish man. And he studied, and he was just a craftsman. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a man of letters. In fact, he was illiterate. He could not read at all. But he sort of studied and did experiments, and he managed to do a little bit of gliding. Jean-Marie Lebris with this contraption down here, and you can see it really looks quite a bit like a bird, sort of a large bullet-shaped body here, but look at these big wagon wheels, which I guess is to handle rough terrain, something like that. But what he did, he pulled that with horses and managed to get himself about 300 feet high, according to what, you know.
Was that just a dolly? Did that fall away, or?
You know, I don't think they were that.
Looks like it probably not, because he had to come down. He was getting labeled.
Yeah, he didn't have to come down, yeah. This isn't the Bell X1, this is, you know. The wheels were the only thing he was sure of, you know.
Yeah,
So,
but it's got a pitot tube.
Looks like it was.
yeah, that's right. They got a pitot tube going
Looks
for
like
it.
it was a surrealist.
I think the aliens told him that's where that
Yeah.
And then Felix du Temple in 1874, he actually had the first powered flight. So this aircraft, you think of 1874, which is right when the hull process for refining aluminum, that was made out of aluminum. So instead of wood, he actually used aluminum to build this. And so maybe there should be an asterisk when I say he's the first person with the powered flight. What he did is he went to the top of a ski jump, pushed his thing down the jump with a little motor running, and it catapulted into the air. And by God, the motor was running, and the propeller was spinning around. And I don't know that the motor helped, but he was in flight with his own power system. So that's, but I mean, that's something. I mean, we shouldn't just forget about that guy. Are you kidding? This guy risked his neck because he thought he could figure it out. You know, we can't just dismiss guys like that. And then we come to John Montgomery. So John Montgomery was here in California. He was on a farm. He was, as far as information goes, really isolated from these other things going on. And these guys are not on the cover of Time magazine. You know, I mean, these guys are all sort of obscure in their experiments. But Montgomery had seen that aviator, and he had heard that people are flying balloons in Europe and things like that, and he just sat down to figure it out. And Montgomery was a savant mathematician. He studied all branches of science. He's like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. He did experiments with radio, with metallurgy, with, obviously with flying, but all sorts of mechanical things, astronomy. Fantastic guy at the right time. Right here in California, in the Silicon Valley area, that in some ways inspired him to do it. Now, people are people, so his dad would have said, "Why are you flying? That's not going to pick any peaches." So I don't understand. Well, that's nice. I guess you did that. I never heard of anybody doing that, but you didn't pick any peaches, and that's really what puts food on the table. So get back to picking peaches. After Montgomery, we have the glider pilots you've heard more about, Otto Lilienthal. By the way, we've gotten contacted from. I got an email from the fellow who says, I'm a model bower in Germany. So, that's nice. What do you want to do? I want to build a Montgomery glider. So, cool. I know some guys I can hook you up with. What are you working on? He says, well, I'm the chief model builder at the Otto Lilienthal Museum, and we want to make a Montgomery exhibit because Otto Lilienthal followed Montgomery, and they totally see it that way, which is interesting because Germany's kind of outside of the Wright brothers' influence, so they have a little more freedom that way. Octave Chanute, of course, was a wonderful guy. He was kind of the internet of the day. He knew everybody and had emails with mail with everybody, and wrote books and kind of summarized the things that were going on. And some of that is because he was an older guy and he wasn't in shape, or maybe he was just saying that he didn't want to do these risky things himself personally. So that gave him kind of a lot more mind share to do, the study and research and correspondence. Samuel Langley, was doing his experiments in 1900. He was an interesting guy. He was the curator of the Smithsonian Museum at the time. So he was also kind of sitting in a place where a lot of information was coming towards him. And then the Wright brothers did their glider work in 1902. All right, so John Montgomery. Always kind of go through, a little bit of a sketch of his life. He was a child of the gold rush, so his parents and grandparents came out here during the gold rush. Not actually to dig gold, but kind of just to sort of make a life, to run a store and do a little bit of farming, things like that. But they're just in love with California. He did all of these different things, conservationist. He was involved with the founding of Big Basin State Park. So it wasn't just this eccentric guy on his own. He was plugged into all kinds of interesting things going on. As I mentioned, in 1869 he saw the aviator. In 1883 he built 3 ornithopters, and we don't have any information about them, but obviously none of them flew, and he survived. So that's better than a lot of ornithopter experimenters. And in 1884 he had the first winged heavier than air flight in the Western Hemisphere. This was down in San Diego at Otay Mesa. He and his brother hid the glider on a hay cart so that neighbors wouldn't see him and kind of poke fun when they went out there. And they flew a couple of times, and then eventually a wind, caught the glider and tipped it over and it cracked. But he had done it, and this was with cambered wings. And the thing that's different about Montgomery is he had done the math and he had studied the science for how things. So he had the concept of control and thrust and lift, and he had these built in. He did have the wires built in for manipulating the control surfaces. And then he went back, and for quite a while he invented his own wind tunnels and water tables. He also invented a spinning wheel that you could put different surfaces and test the lift. So you kind of run it at the circumference. It was an interesting kind of approach to that. But he didn't know anything what anybody else was doing particularly. And then he wound up attending the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And he just kind of went there to see the sights, like a lot of people did that year. The World's Fair is this amazing spectacle, everything that came together. But while he was there, he found out there was the third aeronautical conference And what guys there were that were sort of scientifically studying aeronautics were at the World Fair. So he went, he sat down, well, I want to hear, I've never heard anybody else talk about stuff. And then he realized, I know more than any of these guys, and none of these guys have actually flown. So we went up and talked to the head guy, and Octave Chanute, and says, you know, I've done some interesting things out in California. So, wow, would you like to give a talk? So he actually gave a presentation on soaring flight, and then he wrote up in a manuscript the follow, but it was just an extemporaneous talk, saying all the things that he was doing. In 1896, he joined the Santa Clara College, as it was known then, faculty as a professor of physics. He started a little glider pilot school. He was doing a bunch of experiments down in Aptos. So you mentioned going down to Monterey. This is a good legacy for doing glider work down. A limitation of doing glider experiments, you want to get air time so that you can see, well, if I go left, how much is left and how much is right, how much are things working. So he got the idea, if I suspend my glider up from a hot air balloon and drop it, I'll get a whole lot of air time. So he did several of these at the California State Fair, at the Santa Clara County Fair. Thousands of people were in attendance. They're selling tickets. The big one he did that went up the highest and had the most successful release. And this was complicated. Sometimes it didn't go well. Something go wrong with the balloon. Other things weren't quite right, and kids would go sabotage it. This is kind of a carnival. This isn't some science fair. This is a bunch of hooligans running around trying to amuse themselves and not appreciating the science that they were seeing. So he did this. So he had this glider took 20. So we'll back up a little bit. They said he's a physicist. His goal in experimentation was to figure out how to control an airplane. And he says, once I can figure out how to control an airplane, once I know how flight really works, someone will eventually invent a lightweight motor, and I'll bolt that on, and we'll be able to do all the flying we want. Whereas the Wright brothers kind of said, well, we got something that sort of works. Let's brute force a motor on there, and we'll have ourselves a milestone. He wasn't that concerned with putting a motor on, and he was also broke. He's a poor physics professor, out in Santa Clara. But he had this idea. So when the Wright brothers' service ceiling in 1905 was 20 feet, and they're flying in straight lines, the Montgomery gliders flew for 20 minutes, doing big figure eights, go out there, and land at a predetermined spot on the fairground. And anybody who's ever tried to land at a predetermined spot, you probably know what you're doing by then. So it's a really, really impressive accomplishment. It would have been a wonderful thing to see. Then he had filed for a patent on his control surfaces, and in 1906 he got his patent issued for an airplane. A couple of months after the Wright brothers' patent was issued. So kind of strange, the patent office issued two, and obviously there's some kind of overlap, but there were two patents, Wright brothers and Montgomery. And so now they're in a race for not just who's going to be first to fly, but who's going to make a commercial workable airplane that everybody can fly. It's not just some crackpot guy out doing an experiment. You need to teach the world how to fly, and you need to make money doing at it. Otherwise, you need to be picking peaches. So that's where the race really starts here. And then in 1909, he entered into a contract with Victor Lockheed, which later became Lockheed, to build this self-correcting plane. So something Montgomery was really getting good at down in Aptos. He would launch his airplanes upside down, and really quickly they were so stable they would flip over and right themselves. So they were designing that into the larger airplane. And Lockheed had a guy who had some money, and they were going to build the Montgomery Airplane Company in Chicago. So the race is on for a couple of years. And during this period, the Wright brothers are doing the exact same thing. They're doing glider experiments at Kitty Hawk. They're trying to follow that. They got some investment from Vanderbilt, or Cornelius Vanderbilt Jr., I believe is who he was. So they got money to do that. They were doing experiments with their gliders. Montgomery is out here at Aptos and Evergreen doing his experiments. But unfortunately, on October 31st, 1911, after 50-second flights, a lot of flights through the day, he wanted to do one more. And he ran into, as I understand it, ran into something called a thermal tunnel. is the way people have hypothesized what happened. And it flipped him over. And of course, this is often the case when things go wrong, there's a bunch of things that went wrong at the same time to really make it catastrophic. So it turns out there was a stove bolt in part of the structure behind him. And the assistant had said, hey, I had to clip that bolt. You don't want to have a, and he says, I may make a little bit more adjustments. So leave the bolt out there. So that bolt, and it got him in the brain.
Oh.
And I'll tell you what, one of the most chilling moments in the archive, I've seen that bolt. I've held that bolt in my hand, and you think of what a genius this guy was and what might have been. And this is the bolt that robbed the world of this guy going forward. And what an interesting guy. So that was chilling. So he died. There's kind of an indication of how important someone is. When he died, his obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle was the entire front page. Montgomery dies. And you read through this and it says, the Austrian government sends their condolences to the passing of the father of aviation. And it mentions the different things that he had done. And while we've never heard of him, clearly when he died, he was world famous. This just incredible legacy right up there. The Wright brothers, or he was first, but I mean, everybody knew who John Montgomery was. And then as the years went on, his legacy was forgotten, suppressed. You can imagine the Wright brothers that wanted to monetize their patent and really convince everybody, no, we are the ones who invented everything. They actually did write articles to sort of say, oh, Montgomery did nothing of consequence. He was a farmer out there in California. Us East Coast guys, we do all the important stuff. So that actually happened. But there's quite a few relics and monuments. This is the wing is a monument down at Evergreen Hill. Has anybody ever been down there, Evergreen College? There's a hill called Montgomery Hill. And that's what it is. And that whole Evergreen College used to be what was the ranch, the people there? Arguello. It was the Arguello Ranch, and it was a friend of Montgomery's. So we let him fly off of that hill, and later the family donated it to the city for the school. But you got to preserve the famous Montgomery Hill where the flights were done. So again, you get examples. This guy was famous. This is the monument down in San Diego. This is an excerpt. This is just another thing where I really kind of put myself in his shoes. Talk about the things that were new. So this is you hold these things in your hand. This is his manuscript, and he's talking about just the mystery of how flight is. How is lift generated from a wing without any motion. So I just read this. It's, the wing of a bird resting motionless on a current of air through the ideal of simplicity is nevertheless as worthy of the deepest study as the indifferent-shaped piece of lodestone, a natural magnet, which carries in its bosom the wonders and mysteries of electrical science. And he knew about that. He knew about radio waves, and he knew about magnetism and electricity, and he knew that just looking at this gray piece of rock, all that secret stuff is going on. And he saw a bird wing as the same thing. He said, what are you doing? How do you do that? Birds just sitting there floating in a stream of air. You can see how inspired he was. Now, so that kind of brings us up to this. You can talk all night about the story of John Montgomery, what happened in the patent wars,
I
on
have
and
a
on.
question.
Yes.
With all of those brilliant people before John Montgomery, why are we focusing on John Montgomery for this movie?
What John Montgomery did, he really mastered everything. I mean, he finally put a cherry on top with, okay, here's how lift works. He had a theory of lift. He could build wings and predict what the lift was going to be, and he could calculate, okay, how can I modify these wings? And his theory is called the rotational theory of lift, not just the Bernoulli basic principle, but he actually is down to the next level, a level of detail of theory that most people don't grasp today, is what John Montgomery had understanding at the turn of the century. So he really mastered that, and also he had a different approach, what he wanted to do with the airplane. So the Wright brothers, they had their patent, And what they did, they actually stopped innovating after about 1908, 1910. You don't see like a Wright Brothers superplane. There wasn't anything in World War II. They didn't even use any Wright Brothers planes in World War I. And it's because all they did was just prosecute their patent. They would just sue people for royalties. And some French person would come over and want to fly to do an exhibit and they'd say, you owe us not kidding, $6,000 of royalties before you fly at all. $6,000 of royalties in 1908. Just absolutely preposterous. So the greatest flyer in the world took his little carnival and he went home. And we didn't get to see this. And they actually shut down all aviation innovation in the United States for a couple of decades until into the 1920s. There wasn't anything going on, but the Wright brothers weren't just jumping on it. Montgomery's approach was more, today what we call open source. He wanted his ideas to be out there, because he was actually a smart guy. he could have all kinds of ideas. He says, I've got the basic idea, let's get that out there. Everybody else, you invent the next step, and then I can innovate the step on top of that. So that was his approach, and like I said, we can just imagine what the world would have been like. We had supersonic flight in 1934, who knows? But, really would have set a different pace for all of aviation. And I think we accomplished a lot. But, you look at his buddy, the Lockheeds, and the company that they made, that they went on to make the highest and fastest flying airplane of all time, and the control system that took Apollo to the moon. So I think Montgomery rubbed off pretty nicely on guys like that. And that's a legacy that we should know about. We see that all around us, little echoes of Montgomery. And he's a wonderful inspiration, more things that we can do. I want people to, after this movie gets made, after we get the word out, I want people to you're a total Montgomery. And have that kind of a characterization. So the movie, actually, Veronica, would you like to talk about the movie side of the project?
Sure. So this is a local production. We are planning on bringing jobs to the Bay Area because John Montgomery was our guy in our backyard. He was here, first started in San Diego and Sacramento, and then he was here for the bulk of his experiments and realizations, and all of his gliding, most of his important gliding happened right here in our backyard. So we decided we want to actually shoot at Evergreen. We want to actually shoot some of those key scenes right on Santa Clara campus and use local people for those scenes. But this is going to be a full-length feature film. So our hope is that someone else is going to take this and take it to the next level, and we'll actually be shooting on green screen, and it's not going to be a small production. Right now the budget is right around $5 million. That is a small production, but we're hoping that it will go to that next level, and someone, I can't name names right now, but someone higher than us will take this on and take it from us and do something with it. So that's what we're hoping. But as far as right now goes, we are keeping it local. So I'm going to turn it back over to John.
Yeah. But I think it's really exciting. So we're something that you're going to be able to see at the AMC 14. Kind of a movie. That's what we're gunning for. Right now in the research and screenwriting phase, which is a fascinating process. Next step is major fundraising. And by the way, any of you guys know anybody sort of aviation buffs who'd like to be involved in a project like that, interested in supporting us or corporate sponsors, certainly love to hear that. We also are hoping we can kind of keep in touch with you guys, because we're going to be interested in getting some models for various gliders, and maybe John Montgomery gliders, maybe some of those other gliders that we talked about. String together some stuff like that, so for shooting or for experimenting would sure be a lot of fun. And if any of you guys are interested in kind of keeping in touch about that, all right, there we go.
A friend of mine named Stan Hall was a major contributor with, I forget the professor at Santa Clara University, Reed Bill, that actually restored or built a replica of the Montgomery glider.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm familiar with that project. Oh, wow. There's one other fellow that we've talked to from that project, but he hasn't been very accessible. So I'd love to talk to your friend.
Well, he's not accessible anymore, he's underground.
Oh, well, okay.
He's under the gates of heaven.
Okay, all right. Well, that's really cool, though.
He worked at Lockheed, plus other places. He retired from Lockheed 2 years, he died about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And he's designed worked on more aircraft than I can even
Oh, boy, I can imagine.
But Lockheed supported him to do that, and he worked with others. Sean, you've seen the picture of that? And what did you do about the movie that was made years ago with Glenn Ford?
With Glenn Ford, yeah, A Gallant Journey. So it was a 1946 movie.
Right.
And we've watched that movie, and it's a little bit of it's a Hollywood treatment. And it's kind of a, boy-girl story, and the boy invents an airplane. It doesn't mention the Wright brothers at all. So we're telling a pretty different movie.
That's why I brought it up.
It's a nice start, though.
This is more like a documentary than it is a,
think of the Wright stuff meets young Henry Ford, kind of a feel to it. I mean, there's a lot of,
Okay.
It's not just Boy Meets Girl, but it's not a History Channel documentary either.
I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be a documentary that you would see on the History Channel. This is going to be a full-length feature drama. It's a docudrama. But what we want to do is we want to be historically accurate, but keep the fictionalization so that you guys are interested and you guys really want to watch this. So you remember when the Great Gatsby movie came out with, what's his name?
Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah. All right, so they tried to do that with the fiction. I know it's a fictional character, but they tried to do that with keeping you interested, but keeping true to whatever the book said. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to keep true to the touchstones of John Montgomery and what really happened. That way we want to keep our integrity about the story. But we want to bring that drama. That there's just true drama, that in sincere backroom dealings, that who decides what history is, right? There's this there's this huge controversy that the Wright brothers and the Smithsonian have a contract that no other person will be ever mentioned ever in the history of aviation but us. And that's true, we have the contract. Anybody can see it.
That's why the French were so successful in promoting aviation in France and getting, all the development, most of the development after 1910 occurred there.
Yeah,
Plus some
right.
Brits. They didn't have to cope with
The Wright brothers.
the Wright brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
The most important thing, though, we want to say about this is that we're not trying to take away what the Wright brothers have done. They have definitely done good stuff, and we don't want to take that away from them. But what we want to do is, it's not just the Wright brothers. There are these other people out there who did something, and we're focusing on John Montgomery because he didn't know what else was happening. He wasn't in that club. He did it all on his own through math, physics, and his imagination. And that's why we think it's going to be such a great idea to pair with you guys in these outreach programs for kids, because maybe we can get them excited in science, math, technology, engineering, that kinds of stuff. So I just want to say that. Thanks.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see in the movie the 4,000-foot high balloon drop and glide for 20 minutes.
Coming down. That's
CG.
We'll need some RC planes with cameras attached to them for that.
Oh yeah, to fly chase. Yeah. We actually have. So I mentioned the fellow from Germany who's building a glider. There's other people at Reed Hillview. There's a fellow Jeff Ken Palmer is building a replica of the Gull, the very first glider. Now Ken Palmer, he's the captain of the Civil Air Patrol. Down the John Montgomery chapter, actually, down there at Reed Hillview. I don't know if you ever noticed, but Reed Hillview is on John Montgomery Road. So Just see all this, you'll suddenly notice the Montgomery name, well, San Jose, and all over the place where, he was once really richly recognized. So he has a glider. Out in Sacramento, there's a fellow, Tom Taylor, who is building a flyable replica of the glider that did the balloon drop. And they're going to be flying that as well. So there's kind of a bunch of points of Montgomery recognition, and there's going to be a bunch of photo op, exciting, fun kinds of things. Tom Taylor's buddy is the vice president of the Experimental Aircraft Association out there. It's like, I know you guys are all worried. A bunch of kids watch this guy do a balloon drop, make sure that everything works out well. But they're doing all the right stuff, and we have computational fluid dynamics these days, so we can be a little bit more ahead of these things. So people building these things, activities. We're working with the Santa Clara University Cleary family, the Montgomery family, and what you said, accuracy and true drama. There was a lot of really interesting things that happened, and through our screenplay, we'll weave that through. Him and his girlfriend and his fiance, and there's a lot of other things going on to really highlight stuff. But it's a slice of history that people are completely unaware of because they have this simplistic first grader kind of story about the Wright brothers. So I think this will be a lot of fun to reveal to everybody all these things that went on. Oh, and now we have we actually did raise a kind of a few $1,000s last December to sort of kickstart things going with Kickstarter, and we made a little teaser, kind of a trailer about the video. So wanted to share that with you guys.
I'll turn the lights for us.
Oh, sure, we can.
Oops, sorry.
I hit escape and hit left arrow.
It did.
Hit escape.
There's a light, there's a light switch over there.
Yeah.
Turn that on.
There you are.
Now you can turn that on.
Okay, make that big.
The Wright brothers have been enshrined into our collective memory as the first to fly. But in fact, one man laid the groundwork for American aviation, and much more decades earlier. Welcome to the amazing life of John Joseph Montgomery. He was a famous and brilliant inventor who in 1884 was the first American to fly in a controllable airplane glider. He was known worldwide for his achievements in aviation, radio, and electricity when he died. A proud Californian and an early conservationist, he loved his native California, so much that he was a founder of its first state park, Big Basin. But do you know him today? This film rediscovers those amazing achievements and reveals how the unfortunate machinery of history and backroom maneuvering has resulted in the loss of his impressive legacy. Re-examining the beginnings of American aviation shows that today's narrow focus on two brothers resulted from a lengthy and active campaign to suppress the profound contributions of a great man. So much so that today our classrooms are missing a true star of innovation. But that is about to change. This is a fantastic story about a genius who never gave up on his dream to fly, which led him to cross paths with historical giants of California and American history. He lived in an age of wonders like Stanford's Transcontinental Railroad, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, Edison's light bulb, and above his home loomed the largest telescope in the world. With your help, we will complete the research and development of this project, producing a screenplay and a $5 million budget for a feature-length film. John Montgomery is every unsung hero. His story deserves to be told.
Oh, thanks. We didn't waste any money on the narrator for that one. So the thing.